Right. This week on the Rouge, White, and Blue CFL podcast, we're going to talk a lot of Canadian football and maybe a little bit of trash talking, but probably not. Coming up next. Hi, welcome to the Rouge, White, and Blue CFL podcast. My name's Oz Davis. I'm the co-host of the show. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Joe Pritchard. Joe, how is it going this week?
I think we're both pretty happy with how things turned out this week.
In terms of fantasy football, yes. I was not able to be too happy this week because my Montreal Alouettes were off, and your Winnipeg Blue Bombers again, showed us why we should all be so terrified of them. So it wasn't an awesome week for me, but my awesomeness in CFL, my late season awesomeness in CFL fantasy football really paid off. I advanced in the playoffs. USFL Tecmo, coached by the great Joe Pritchard, who finished first in the Canadian Football Podcast Weekly Fantasy Football League, also won this week rather handily. The rest of us did not win by so great a margin. Sadly, we have bounced the Turf District podcast as we both faced off against their members this week. I personally won by the skin of my teeth, so I actually can't talk too much trash. Won by 6.0 points, which was exactly the amount of points my Riders defense scored for me. So I'm certainly not unhappy about the win, but I'm not going to get too braggadocious. I mean, I squeaked into the playoffs. Joe, I was trying to think of the football equivalent of my season, the CFL equivalent of my season. Because, okay, I started off super hot. I mean, I was setting records. Literally after week one, I think I was 17th overall in the game. I scored over 160 points that first week. It was ridiculous. I was 3-1 after 4. I had several 100-point games, 120-point games at least already. Then pretty much total collapse. Bottom out in the free-for-all week, which is 1 week every year in this league. We just play for points. The top half gets the win. The bottom half does not get the win. I bottomed out in that. I was one of the worst teams in the league that week. And then suddenly just went off, had a great final third of the season, won, I think, my last 5 games. It was quite a lot at the end. Finished 9-8. So what is the CFL equivalent here? Am I one of those Toronto Argonauts teams? Am I that second-year Burris Red Blacks team?
No, I have a better reference, I think, and one that matches my fandom here. Remember 2019 for Winnipeg?
Okay.
They start out, 5-0 or something, or 5-1, and then Matt Nichols goes down. They struggle for a while. They trade for Zach Collaros, and off we go into October and November, all of a sudden just steamrolling people.
Right. Okay. So in other words, I'm just gonna, as the visiting team, as the underdog, I'm just gonna run right through these playoffs.
Yep. So I do want to congratulate you on your victory over me next week.
Yes, thanks to the evil reseed. Unfortunately, the Rouge, White, and Blue is going to have the Civil War. I was looking forward to making the reference, in the Grey Cup, that this would be like the Sacramento Gold Miners versus the Baltimore Stallions in the Grey Cup, but unfortunately, I won't be able to make that reference.
I mean, well, at least one of us is going to get there, right?
Yeah, yeah, one of us will be representing the Stallions anyway.
And everybody else can root against us. That's fine.
Right,
That's the way this is
exactly.
supposed to work.
Exactly. Well, I mean,
We
my
can
argument.
we can be
Sorry.
the bad guys.
Oh, sure, sure. Why not? I mean, look, it's still within the ratio, right? 50-50. That's fair enough, right? Ratio. We're playing by the same rules,
Mhm.
unlike those American CFL teams sometimes did. Uh, so no problem there. I don't think there should be a complaint. Okay, so anyway, talking about the real games, basically, Joe, I felt like by the end of the weekend, I mean, the league we're basically down to 7 teams,
Right,
right?
we are.
And realistically, it's 6 teams plus the you know hanging on by the dental floss Hamilton Tiger Cats, who need Toronto to lose out and themselves to win out, and they've got the bye next week, so it's totally out of their hands at this point. So, whereas normally I figured we'd just do the wrap of the games in order, I wanted to start with that Riders Edmonton game because this was really one that really shut the door on those Western teams, and combined with the early week Winnipeg loss, really sort of, I mean, again, Hamilton's hopes just they're in the sixth level of hell right now of the seven levels. So it's
Right. They had like a magic number of 3 going into the week, and now they're down to 1.
one. Yep.
So,
Yep.
or tragic number as it is going the other way. So,
Right. Yeah. All Toronto has to do is win one of these last games. Now, that's not to say that Toronto could not lose out. I mean, they are playing, let's say, charitably speaking, half-heartedly at this point in the season. I feel like so. I would not be surprised to see them going down. We're going to talk about that Toronto Montreal game uh, momentarily at the end of the podcast. But all right, so I don't know. Like, at what point, Joe, did you feel like the door closed on Edmonton in this game? When
I don't
was it
really
over
think
for
it
you?
closed entirely until very, very late. They were in it the whole time. They just kept
Yes.
opportunity after opportunity kept going past, and that was that.
Right.
Eventually, you run out of them. And
Right.
when you start 0-7, was it 0-7 or such? You don't have a lot of wiggle room anymore. So you have to take advantage of every opportunity that comes by. And they ran in once they got hot for a while, then they ran into Winnipeg back to back in Saskatchewan, who's rebounded from their swoon. So
Right. But that
they
was
had to play their A games these past 3 weeks to have a shot, and they didn't.
yeah, that was the thing. Their hole had been dug so deeply that even when 3 of the 5 teams in the West were plummeting, they still were unable to really take advantage of enough opportunities. I mean, really, all they needed was one more win somewhere in the season, and they'd still be in it right now. They'd
Right.
still be in the discussion right now.
Right. And 3 weeks ago, the way things were going, it was who is Edmonton going to catch as opposed to are
Right,
they going to catch anybody?
right, right. Yep, yep. And and this game, I don't know. This game kind of felt like a microcosm of the Elks season. There was one part in the fourth quarter. Oh my God, there was this tremendous sequence where, on second down, Elks coach calls for a challenge on a play that he really couldn't challenge because no flag had been called. The TSN guy, Suits, and his compadre theorized that maybe he wanted an illegal contact off the ball. the upshot of this was it wasn't just like a silly Winnipeg challenge like from earlier in the season, but the upshot of this was is not only does the camera crew look at nothing, he loses the challenge. Okay, so then there's a punt, and then the Elks just annihilate Trevor Harris, send him back 11 yards, cause a fumble, which a big man tried to run back for the touchdown, but the play was dead. Then on the next play, the Elks had what 14 men on the field. I mean, it's just like what is happening here? And then even after this sequence, the Elks got the ball back, I think, 3 or 4 more times. They just couldn't do anything with it. Right after that, right after Saskatchewan punted, the Elks took a 2-and-out, and then the Elks picked off the next play at midfield. Still, nothing came of it. Nothing came of it. The one time when they thought they had a touchdown, or at least the threat of a touchdown to take the game, receiver lands on the 6-yard line. They call it back, no catch, incomplete pass. And so, with 7 points, okay, here's a theoretical, Joe. All right. You're down, and you play tabletop. Okay.
Mhm.
Maybe you're not a professional head coach, but you know your strategy. All right. Theoretical. Your offense is your much better half of your team. Okay.
Right.
It's third and 4, 6 minutes left. All right. Plenty of time. Plenty of time. You're you're pretty far along. And why do you kick the field goal? Why do you kick the
Well,
field goal?
especially when your field goal kicker is the least trustworthy field goal kicker in the league, too, right?
Well, he made it on this time, but it didn't matter because they still needed the touchdown. I
Yep.
suppose maybe they
Yeah.
could have gotten a Rouge in there somewhere, but it doesn't seem likely at that point.
No. Like why make a one touchdown? Why make a situation where you need one touchdown? Make a call that still means you need to score a touchdown. Now the
Yeah,
touchdown becomes a winning touchdown if Saskatchewan doesn't score anymore. I mean, that's the one upside there.
yeah,
But you still need it. And if you want that extra point, go for two. And you'd better have a play or two you trust, like with your life, for a
yeah,
two-point
yeah,
conversion
yeah.
when you need it.
Sure. I mean, there was plenty of time left. I mean, 6 minutes. I mean, and the thing is it's ironic because in that third quarter, in that fourth quarter, it was the Elks defense like bailing them out time and again,
Right.
right? They were getting the
And you
turnovers
can't
on the
trust
Riders.
that. You can't trust that the entire game.
No, no, you can't. You can't. Should have gone. Should have gone with the offense. Should have gone with the offense. Um, on that play, it's really too bad. But at least in Edmonton, the CFL Twitterverse is not freaking out about their coaching staff, is not freaking out about their roster like they are in Calgary after getting. Let's
Yeah, and
face
I
it.
do have one more point to make about the
Oh,
Edmonton
sure, go
Saskatchewan
for
game
it. I
before
was
we
going to
move
go to
on.
the Calgary game, but go for it. Tell me.
Yeah, they had the chili cook-off before the game in the tailgating area. And our friends in the turf district and our friends with the Elks herd were involved in that. And
Okay.
apparently the Elks decided that not only was that going to happen, but they were also going to play in a way that gave their fans heartburn. I feel like our buddy
Oh,
Scout had to go home at halftime. Unfortunately, he didn't feel so hot after all of it. So
oh,
um, his team didn't do him any favors in that way.
Jesus. Joe, you stopped my run for that heartburn
Yes,
joke.
yes, I
Oh,
did.
come on. I see that now that your son is growing, the dad jokes are really flowing, huh?
Hmm. I'm well in practice at this point.
Great. Pretty soon you'll be able to embarrass him in front of his school chums.
Yes, that's the whole point.
I love it. You're taking to this like a fish to water, Joe.
Mhm.
This is perfect.
Well, I gotta
Um,
have. There's got to be some upside, right?
so so okay. So yeah, I was gonna go next to the BC Calgary game. Somehow Calgary lost this game 32-15, despite a very MOP performance from Nathan Rourke, who some people had on their fantasy team, but succeeded despite him. Um, how did, I guess my question is, I guess the way I want to start is, how did everybody, basically every team in our fantasy football league, know to start the BC defense? How did they
because
know?
because the BC defense was cheaper than a lot of them,
Oh,
and
okay.
they were playing Calgary.
Okay.
I
Well,
mean, that
yeah,
was
but
my logic anyway.
still, Calgary has not been a turnover machine. Calgary has been winless on the road this season, and that continues here, which is, I mean, really explains a lot about how this team is in fifth place in the West, the worst team in the league actually by record, winless on the road, but still, this BC Lions. I mean, this was a game. Okay, it wasn't the prettiest game in the world, but for the longest time, this game was 9-8. I mean, Calgary defense was keeping them in it. Reggie Bagleton was bottled up by the BC defense. And for a long time, this looked like the best game the Lions defense had played all year. And then just this explosion in the fourth quarter, which really ruined my day because I'm watching these things early in the morning here in Europe. Really ruined my day with this performance as I was facing off against a fantasy team that had the BC defense. Really, they could have been your captain this week. They outscored most individual players this week in fantasy. But the only one they didn't outdo was Oliveira. As far as I can tell, almost every player was outdone by BC defense this week because of that ridiculous fourth quarter. All season, this made up for a season of just blah coverage in the secondary. Was this game? Was this game? The one time they blew coverage on Bagleton was that garbage time touchdown from Matthew Schultz, who, for the first time since he put on a Montreal uniform, I am thanking for this game. Thank you for the garbage time touchdown to Reggie Bagleton. Gave me the win this week. So thank you, Matthew Schultz. But still, all right. So let's talk about Calgary first. All right. How radical do they have to get this offseason?
Well, they need a quarterback they can trust. They
Okay.
don't have that.
Okay.
They do have decent running backs, and they have the start of a good wide receiver set. I'm sure they could use some work on the O line. Everybody can. They're just lacking star power right now. I mean, have you heard?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was their big free agent signing because he had a bunch of interceptions in Winnipeg last year.
Right.
Like,
Right.
where's the star power on defense? They have a little bit on offense without it, but they haven't been able to stop the run. Being lacking talent,
Mm-hmm.
guys that can play the game, they don't have anybody that stands out. You don't sit there and go, okay, Calgary has this guy we got to run away from. They have this guy on that side of of the secondary that we can't throw towards. They don't have. I mean, Reggie Bagleton's a great receiver. They
Yeah.
don't have anybody else in that
No.
receiving core that you go, I'm scared of. So
No.
then you could blanket Bagleton with your coverages.
Yep.
So I mean, they're just short. They came up short this year because they just don't have enough, and they didn't have enough last year either. But they got bailed out by the Riders, just completely crashing and burning. So you would have thought that they would have had one more year to go. Okay, let's go. Let's keep this playoff run alive.
Yep. Yep.
And they tried. I mean, I'm not going to say they didn't because they did go after Demary Houston in free agency. He had a lot of interceptions in Winnipeg last year. I just there's
You
I
say
don't.
you say they
They're
went ahead
short.
and you said they went ahead in free agency, but one of the things that's going around the CFL Twitterverse right now is they released or somehow this got out. I don't know who released it. The salaries for these teams. The salary, the payrolls for these teams. And the truth is that Calgary is spending about $1 million less than your top teams in this league this year. They really don't have anybody.
Doesn't help
It's
either.
it's Bagleton and a cast of thousands, I feel like, out there. Bagleton is an all pro. It's amazing this season that he's put together. He's actually he's played in basically every game for these Stampeders. He puts up numbers every week, despite the fact that most defenses know he's the only option on 7 out of 8 plays, 7 out of 8 passing plays. He's still putting up these stats. He's a stud among millions out there, I feel like. And that's the one thing I was wondering. Forget Dickinson. Forget about solving, any issues at GM or with the draft or whatever. Will Bagleton stick around next year?
We'll
I
see.
mean, doesn't this guy feel like chasing another Grey Cup? Because I don't think that Calgary will be around to compete seriously next season. I mean, it's a long way from now, but still, all things being equal, I don't know
Yeah.
how competitive they will be.
Yeah, I would say if I'm sitting here trying to pick, if I'm a new fan looking at all of these teams and their rosters and how well they're going to be able to compete over the next little while, I think Calgary would be ninth in my estimation. Because at least in Hamilton, they either keep Bo and have a star quarterback,
Mhm,
or they move on to Taylor Powell and they have a guy they feel comfortable with.
mhm, mhm,
And they have a couple of star receivers, either Tim White or Shamar Bridges, who's unfortunately out for the rest of the season. They have a few other talented receivers around him. They have building blocks. Edmonton's got building blocks.
mhm,
I don't know if Calgary does anymore.
mhm.
Like Calgary might be the team that has to rip out the studs and have 2 or 3 years in the wilderness to
Yeah,
build back up. And in the
yeah.
CFL, you can turn things around pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
But when you're at this level of talent,
Mhm.
it it might take 2 or 3 years to rebuild all that
Well, look at
because
the
they
Red
just
Blacks.
haven't. Yeah.
Look at the Red Blacks. For
Mhm.
a couple of years there after COVID, Lewis Ward was their best player.
Yeah, and
Right?
they were trying, they were adding a bunch of talent. Each year was a revolving
Yep.
door, and they were finding a piece here and there instead of the 5 they needed.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
Well,
Calgary right now probably needs like 3, 4, 5 better players than they have right now.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really hard to get that in one off season,
Oh yeah.
especially if one of those positions is quarterback.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. Rarely do players in the CFL, once free agency hits, go to a worse team in the CFL. They're much more likely to go from
Unless
that.
you're throwing a lot of cash at them.
Yeah.
See
From
Edmonton
the
and wide
hometown.
receivers over the past 3 or 4 years.
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But most teams will prefer to move up, if not to the other side of the border. So
Right.
very rarely do you see that downward movement. But again,
And
like I was saying before about Ottawa, we've seen this gradual evolution. For the past 3 seasons, we've assumed that they're going to finish in last. They got no names, da 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 da. But this season they've been competitive. They've
right.
maintained smart football. They've built a nucleus, which is always nice. It's very hard to build instant super teams in any sort of professional football. So, it's good to see that evolution. And yeah, so maybe, Calgary could start with the extinction level event. Maybe they could clean house. Maybe they
They
should start with a fresh slate.
they might have to. They might have to overpay for free agents to come right now,
Uh-huh.
which might necessitate a change at the top because
Mhm.
you're running the same. You're probably running. Dickinson's probably taking Hufnagel's playbook and trying to run it, and it's just not working anymore
Yeah.
for whatever reason. I'm not gonna sit here and point blame. I don't know enough as to say why it's going the way it's going.
Uh,
But at the same time, what's been working for the last 20 years has stopped working.
Right.
So you
Exactly.
almost need to, if you're in Calgary's boat, you might have to throw more money than you're used to throwing at free agents to try to get some pillars in there, and then hope you hit on a couple of the U.S. free agents that come up every year, and you don't know their names until mid-June, when all of a sudden,
Right.
hey, who's that guy? He just put up 4 catches for 120 yards.
Yeah.
Where'd he come from?
Yeah.
And that happens
Well,
every year, and you need one or two of those guys every season too.
well, Joey came from South Dakota State.
Or, I,
you know,
yeah, exactly.
you know,
That,
Canisius.
or even like
Rutgers.
Winnipeg had Ontario Wilson out of Florida State.
Right.
Found him,
Right.
brought him
Right.
up, and it
Yep.
worked out really well.
Yep.
But you almost need to every season have one or two of those guys that when we're sitting here in May previewing, we don't know their names. We
Yep.
don't know if they're even going to make the team, and they need to be a contributor because when you're sitting there in May, the 24 players you think are going to be starters, at least 5 of them are not going to be starters by the end of the year for some reason or another,
Right.
be it injury, ineffectiveness, what have you.
This is what somebody on Twitter brought up. Now I know that hindsight is 2020, and on Twitter it's positively telescopic. It's X-ray vision on Twitter. But somebody said that what they claimed that they were saying in the offseason was that Calgary should have hired Chris Jones as a scout, right, to head up the American scouting team, and it's just like, okay, that kind of makes sense, right? Because Jones was really good at this, finding guys, especially from the south of the U.S., who can play ball. Unfortunately, he was a little bit too good at this because, especially when he was in Saskatchewan, he had that revolving door going. He wanted to look at everybody. He
And
wanted to have
that's
the 90-man roster.
and that's part of why he struggled as the guy that's in charge of everything.
Right.
He's really good
Yep.
at certain things, like running a defense. Remember early in the
Yes.
season, we were talking about Hamilton struggling on defense and
Yes.
not being able to use all the pieces they brought in, and they were putting square pegs in round, or trying to put square pegs in round holes. Well, Chris Jones found the square holes in that defense and put
Yep.
those guys in there, and they're at least better than they were.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's where he comes in. He's really good at running a defense.
Mm-hmm. 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 I mean, he is a decent judge of talent as well. It's just, he likes everything he sees is the problem. He can't say no to anything. So any player that he likes, right? So I thought that this was kind of his problem in Saskatchewan. Okay, so all right, we're going to talk about BC a bit later because, of course, BC has their key matchup next week. Should decide much of the Western playoffs, that matchup. So the third game of the week, of course, Winnipeg took care of business, let's say, against the Tiger Cats. Do you want to take any sort of victory lap here, Joe?
Yes, I'd love to.
Sure, go for it. Go for it.
That was Winnipeg asserting their dominance.
Right.
That was just them going, this is our game plan. This is how we do things. We're going to make you stop us. And Hamilton couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Winnipeg got out to a decent lead early on, even led by 10 in the second. We're up 7 at halftime after giving up making a nice stop after a really bad defensive play. Brandon O'Leary Orange going through the middle shouldn't have been, 50, 60, 70 yards like that?
Mm-hmm.
But then they made the stop on defense to keep them from turning
Yeah.
that into 7.
Yeah.
And that was a turning point for me. That was them just going, nope, you're getting 3 and you're going to like it.
Yeah, not today. Yep.
And then when they got the ball in the second half, they're just like, you know what we're going to do? Stop us. Brady. Oh, Nick. Brady. And just enough Nick Dembski to keep people going the wrong way.
Uh-huh. Right. Nice. Yep. All this season, typically on the Rouge, White, and Blue, we talk about tiers. We talk about these tiers of teams. We haven't had to do that so much this season because, wow, there's so much
Because
parity.
it's been a complete mess.
Well, there's so much parity. I mean, now that we're almost at the end of the season, look, what are we getting? We're getting a bunch of teams clustered within 2 games of 500. Right? I mean, that's the way this is going to end. I mean,
And
this is
it's
going to
weird, like, our West predictions are almost bang on.
yeah, yeah. Except for I think that the
Not the
records,
numbers,
yeah, the
but the
records, I think
order.
be a little higher. Yeah, yeah. But there's a lot of teams bunched up in the middle this year. However, there are two teams on tier one, and this was a tier one team taking care of business the way that they should. Right? I
Mhm.
mean, there are two teams right now that are playing far above the rest of the league as far as I can see it. Would you agree, Joe?
I would say,
I
and
mean,
and even Montreal's playing a little bit worse than you'd expect them to play lately, but
yeah.
they were they played so well at the beginning of the season, they had a lot of wiggle room. So they were able to take care of business the way they needed to, and hopefully them coasting into the playoffs over the next month doesn't mean that they show up and just are no-show these final like somebody else did last year.
Well, Joe, like I've been saying too, Joe. I mean, the defense has still been great. I mean, even in games like the Lions loss and this most recent Argos loss, the defense has still been making plays.
Mhm.
I mean, they've lost that BC game by what, 24 points or something like that. They still won the turnover battle. The defense is doing what they can in these games. In the game against Toronto, they were on the field for like, what was it? They were on the field for 60 some odd percent of the game. You know, Again, the defense is doing everything they can for Montreal. That's why I still consider Montreal the team to beat in the East. I mean,
Yeah,
because
absolutely. They
it's
still are.
yeah, it's
They're
low
just they're
powered.
just slightly less dominant than they were earlier this season, and
Oh yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not running teams through the ringer anymore, but when it comes down to it, you're not going to score. You're not going to score on Montreal when you need to. So I believe. We'll see next week. We'll see next week. Maybe this bye week they can get the offense out of the funk. But yeah, I just wanted to say again. I said this last week. The CFL did not need to see the Bombers like this. Galeras is playing his best ball of the season. Of course, Brady was a machine again. It's just like, we do not need to see this. For,
Disagree for some reason. I don't know
well,
why
yeah,
that
for
possibly could be.
fans of the other 8 teams in this league are not enjoying this right now. Not so much. We are afraid. We are very, very afraid. Okay, so we'll talk about next week's games. Let's do the sponsor thing. Okay, our sponsor is, as always, Royal Retros at royalretros.com. In this case, retros means retro memorabilia, stuff like caps, jerseys, t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, hoodies, jackets, and more of your favorite defunct teams from defunct leagues. Now, I was looking around here at Royal Retros today, and I'm looking at it right now. Joe, maybe you can help me out with some of these because I'm a bit I don't know. I like to think of myself as a bit of a sports history enthusiast, but even on some of these, I'm drawing a blank, right? There's a couple right on the top page under new releases. There's a couple of really sharp looking hockey jerseys. There's one here from the Florida Blockbusters. Joe, do you even know who this is?
I think I saw this just like earlier this week, where it was one of the ideas for what became the Florida Panthers because
Ah,
Wayne Huizenga created that team. Wayne Huizenga created Blockbuster. So, I mean,
okay.
I think it was a thought. It might have even been a serious thought, but it wasn't a thing that actually happened.
Okay. Okay. And there's also a nice one from the Montreal, the Quebec Aces, who was first an amateur team and then a pro team in the Canadian minor leagues. Sharp looking jersey here. The Quebec Aces. Very nice looking jersey. So, teams like this from leagues like this at royalretros.com. Best of all, for listeners to the show, please enter the promo code RWBCFL at checkout for 10% off of anything you buy from the store. So that's royalretros.com, RWBCFL at checkout for 10% off. Get your awesome defunct team and league gear. Okay, let's talk about next week. The key matchup, of course, will be
Well, let's hit playoff scenarios first,
Oh, yes, of
because that's our
course. Yeah, how
favorite,
could I
right?
forget? How could I forget? Playoff scenarios. Now, a lot of these are pretty simple at this point, right, Joe?
Yeah, let me run down what last week's scenarios were,
Yeah.
and we'll check the boxes, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
So last week, the East Division, the only scenario was a Hamilton loss means Ottawa clinches. Check. Winnipeg win and a Saskatchewan loss means Winnipeg claims the division title. That did not happen. Winnipeg win or Saskatchewan loss or BC loss, one of which happened. Winnipeg secures a home playoff date.
Right.
When Saskatchewan win and Calgary loss and Hamilton loss, all three happened. Saskatchewan's in the playoffs. BC win and Hamilton loss and Edmonton loss, BC clinches a playoff berth. Which means this week, just doing the math on the back of an envelope, means when either a Winnipeg win or a Saskatchewan loss, or even a Saskatchewan tie while we're at it, because they have the tie. Any one of those things over the next 3 weeks, and Winnipeg has won the division.
Okay.
Right. So,
Okay.
looking at the schedule, both teams play this week, so this could be
Yes.
determined as soon as Friday night or Saturday, or might go into week 20. Who knows? It's a thing. But week 20, neither team plays. So, if Winnipeg loses and Saskatchewan wins, week 21 means everything for Winnipeg and Saskatchewan. Winnipeg gets Montreal. Saskatchewan gets Calgary that week. So we'll see. We'll have to see on that. I mean, if I'm a Saskatchewan fan, I'm not banking on things because Montreal's probably not playing all their starters all that game. But it's still fun to dream, right?
Yeah. I'm wondering about the Montreal strategy for the rest of the season here going forward. But yeah, as far as I could tell, and I know this isn't mathematically correct, okay, so because I know that in theory Hamilton is still involved in the playoffs.
Right.
But as far as I can tell, Joe, really the two games that are going to matter the rest of the way are BC at Saskatchewan this week, then Ottawa Toronto in week 20, right? I mean,
those two are biggies, yes.
Yeah, those will determine, I think, seeing, figuring that Hamilton will lose somewhere or Toronto will win maybe this Ottawa game, that those are the two games that will determine the rest of the playoffs.
Right, because that's the only other playoff scenario based off of my back of the envelope math, and wait for the league because they usually come out Tuesday or Wednesday with the official ones. But Hamilton can't lose again, and Toronto can't win again.
Right.
Otherwise, Toronto is in the playoffs.
Right.
Then the only thing left to determine after that is seeding in the West and the East.
Yeah.
And it's just Saskatchewan's a half game ahead of BC. Ottawa would be right now is a half game ahead of Toronto, and let the rest of the chips fall where they may. None of that's going to be determined in week 19, I don't believe. Actually, though, let me see. I'm just looking at this right now. If Ottawa wins, Toronto loses, still not a guarantee because they both play 2 more times, but it would almost secure it for Ottawa, the second seed.
Yeah. Right.
But it's not in stone, so that wouldn't even be a scenario.
Yeah. This because Hamilton's off next week, so we can't say anything for sure about that East.
There is one scenario. There's one other scenario in play, though, just based off of me doing the math here. If Saskatchewan beats BC,
right,
Saskatchewan hosts the West semi, at least.
Wow, really?
Right. Saskatchewan would clinch a home playoff game by knocking BC to 8-9. Saskatchewan would be 9-7-1 and could not be caught.
Okay.
What Winnipeg does beforehand might keep Saskatchewan out of the first spot regardless.
Mhm.
But both teams only have 2 games remaining. Saskatchewan could theoretically
Right.
catch Winnipeg. Same scenarios we've been talking about, like Saskatchewan would have to win 2, Winnipeg would have to lose both
Right.
for them to catch it. But Saskatchewan could clinch a home playoff game this week.
Yeah, but Winnipeg could too, right? Winnipeg could clinch
Winnipeg has a
the
home playoff
West.
game already clinched, and Winnipeg could clinch the West as soon as Friday night by beating Toronto if they do.
Right. Okay. Okay. Right. So that's all they need to do. So
Right.
Winnipeg is playing to win, right?
Right. Winnipeg's
Okay.
playing to win. They need to win one of their two, or Saskatchewan needs to lose one of their two. There's
Okay.
4 games left. One of them has to go Winnipeg's way for Winnipeg to clinch the West.
Okay.
But Saskatchewan could clinch a home playoff date with a victory over
Right.
BC.
Right.
If Saskatchewan loses this week,
Right.
then they need BC to lose to Montreal in week 20, or they need to beat Calgary in week 21
Okay.
because they would reverse positions because Saskatchewan's 8-7-1 right now, BC is 8-8. BC would go ahead of Saskatchewan if they win this week, and then make it where BC would have to win for BC to clinch a home playoff spot, or Saskatchewan would have to lose. So lots in play for that game.
Yeah. Yeah. But basically, I mean, odds are that whoever wins is second place.
Right, but it's not a guarantee. If BC
No.
wins this week, it's not a guarantee they're in second
Right.
place
That's a possibility.
because only one of two. If there's only 2 games left for the teams, and if they both go Saskatchewan's way, they still end up second.
Okay.
So having
Oh, okay.
2 games to
Wow.
have a certain outcome
Wow.
is a lot easier than 4 games, right?
Okay. Yep. Yep. Of course.
'Cause I think somebody on Reddit built like a playoff machine that you could toy with.
Nice.
I'd have to
Nice.
go find it again, and I don't know if it's updated yet, but you could run through all the scenarios. I'll try to find it and
Nice.
shoot it to you if I can find it again.
Great. Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun. Like we say, next week, it's all of these questions. Well, many of these questions will be answered. We start the week with Toronto at Winnipeg, and I'm very happy to hear Joe say that Winnipeg has to play for the win to ice that Western top of the bracket, because I would love to see Toronto have to sweat it out for another week. Have to really throw more energy out there before going
And
into the
so
playoffs.
and so is Hamilton. They're rooting for Winnipeg
Oh,
for
of course
sure.
they are. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Winnipeg is definitely in your camp this week, Joe.
I mean, I bought my
Absolutely.
dad a shirt this week, or for his birthday this week, that says, and he's already gotten it, so I'm not giving anything away. But my favorite teams are the Packers and whoever beats the Vikings. That's how Hamilton fans think of, include Ticats and whoever beats the Argos. That's the way they live their life, and good for them. So
Right.
they would root against the Argos anyway, but now they have extra incentive to do so.
Nice. I always say my favorite football teams are the Montreal Alouettes and whoever I'm betting money on this week. Those are my favorites. I don't have much loyalty beyond that.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
anybody that watches college football's favorite team right now is Vanderbilt. And any Canadian college football fan is also rooting for Indiana. I didn't know Indiana was even allowed to go 6-0. I didn't think that was even within the rules, but there they are. And there's Curtis Rourke, and I mean, he should get a contract just based on that. Like he
yeah,
could just go home right now, and he should get a multi-million-dollar contract for what he just did.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well put. All right, I'm looking forward to drafting him next year. Uh, let's see. So, okay. So, yeah, I'll take Toronto in this game. Sure. I mean, I'll take Winnipeg in this game. Sure. I just,
Yep.
they're too hot right now. They want to win. They have to win. They're not done making statements yet. Bray really wants to nail down that MOP award. So, I'll take Winnipeg. I'll take Winnipeg in this game.
Yeah, me too. They're
Yep.
playing really, really well. Toronto's a team I could see knocking them off, but I don't know if Toronto has quite enough incentive. I mean, seeding is one thing, but Winnipeg's going for the division, and they want to
Yeah.
celebrate it at home. So
Not right now. No, not right now. Toronto does not want to face this Winnipeg team right now. They
No,
don't.
nobody does.
This second game, not very relevant. Edmonton Elks at Calgary Stampeders. I almost feel like this is some Calgary Stampeders playing for their jobs. Um, the truth is that now the Stamps are 0-6-1 in their past 7. That is their longest winless streak since 1976. Okay. We've also stated that they've been bounced from the playoffs for the first time in 20 years. So one can't help but wonder the effects a loss might have on the future of this team to the Edmonton Elks, who, fourth best team in the West. So Calgary probably doesn't want to lose this game, but I don't know. They might. Edmonton has the capacity to put up a lot of points.
They do.
So,
And Edmonton's trying to sweep Calgary, and Calgary not playing well kind of puts me in the Edmonton camp for this one. I
wow.
think they're going to take it.
Yeah. I'm going to
Because
go
if
with
they
Edmonton.
sweep Calgary, that's at least something of a positive for the season.
Do you think Hamilton's saying the same thing about Toronto?
Yeah. They would have that in their back pocket for when the Argos fan walks around and go, yeah, by the way, we beat you every time we saw you
Yeah,
this year.
3 times. 3 times.
Right.
The only other team in the East that has a winning record against the East, besides Montreal, is Hamilton because of those 3 wins. Hamilton is 4-3 against the East, and they're 3-0 against Toronto. It's the craziest thing. But that's one of the crazy aspects of this year in the CFL. Okay, so here's the big one: BC at Saskatchewan. Okay, Saskatchewan now have won 2 in a row. BC got by the dint of their defense, who had basically a career year in the fourth quarter of last week. So I don't know. Lukewarm against lukewarm. Joe, what do you say?
Saskatchewan's been playing better lately. I'm taking Saskatchewan, especially
You're going
since
to take
they're at home.
Saskatchewan?
Yeah. I would have had to think long and hard about it if it was in BC because it wouldn't be an automatic BC at that point. But Saskatchewan at home, and they've bounced back from their struggles midseason. It's pretty clear Saskatchewan's taking this one.
I would really like to be able to pick against the Riders.
Me too.
so so maybe I will here. And the thing is, maybe if this had happened around the time of the BC Montreal game, when the BC offense looked like the offense should look, um, maybe then, because I could count on Nathan Rourke not to take chances and turn the ball over. But Jesus, against the Riders, I mean, this team has been turning the ball over on everybody this season. Kind of want to go against Joe here to make it interesting, but I can't in good conscience take the Lions right now. So I'm going to go with
I,
the Riders, I guess. I'm going to be
I
boring.
did like what Nathan Rourke said, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. 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 Well, that was, I mean, like I said in my tweet, that was Nathan Rourke's best quote of the year. I mean,
Yeah.
that was his best play of the week. That was his best play of the week. Saying that some reporter asked him if they were cheering for the Riders to win so that they could eliminate Calgary and Edmonton. BC wouldn't have to worry. BC had clinched a playoff spot based on the Saskatchewan win. And Nathan Rourke said something to the effect of, I could never root for the Riders. So as a Vancouver boy, he could never do so. So, but yeah, again, in that game last week, oh boy, coming out of the bye, nothing, just nothing. 10.3 fantasy points, something like this. Just nothing to show for it. And so against this Riders defense who just scope out that turnover, I just can't see it. I just can't see it. I think the Riders are in much better shape going into the Western playoffs, which is not to say that they're in great shape going into the Western playoffs. Still don't have confidence in these guys in general, but this week they can get it done. All right, now the final game. Now, this is a bit of an interesting one here. Ottawa Red Blacks at Montreal. Montreal's major vested interest here, I think, is one, feeling out the Red Blacks for the inevitable playoff game, and two, making life harder for Ottawa. Right? Montreal is going to win this one outright. But on the other hand, I can't believe that they're going to show them much on offense. And so for me, this is about how much can the Montreal defense dominate this game? Because I think they're not going to mind showing anything with their defensive coverages because all year long, the Montreal defensive coverages have been impossible to read. The nice thing about this defense is they haven't been able to tell who's rushing the quarterback and who's dropping into coverage. And I think we're going to see a lot of that in this game. I think the best bet is probably the under.
Yeah,
And
I would say.
I will take Montreal.
I'm taking Montreal too. I'm in complete agreement because they don't have any reason to show Ottawa anything. At the same time, I don't trust Ottawa's offense to penetrate Montreal's defense. And Montreal's offense on a base level, running base personnel, running base packages, should be enough to put up 20 points against Ottawa.
I think
and that's all they're going to need.
I don't even think the offense is going to put up 20. I think the defense is going to put up 7. I think if you're into that
too.
Yeah, if you're in that proposition bet voodoo, that might be a good bet because Montreal defense to score a touchdown would probably be about 3-1, 4-1. I think that would be a good prop bet, but I don't really endorse prop bets. I think prop bets are basically gambling. But if you feel like gambling, that might be a good bet this week. Yeah, okay. I think Montreal, if they are wise, is going to use this last few games, these last few dead games, as a tune-up for this offense, which really needs a spark right now.
Yeah, really play Cody for a half, play Davis Alexander for a half, and they both have shown they're capable of moving the offense.
Yep.
You're giving Davis Alexander some valuable reps.
Yep.
You're giving Cody just enough reps to keep him sharp.
Yep.
And then if there's an injury later on, Davis has gotten some reps lately. You're good to go there.
I hate that expression, fundamental football, but I want to hear it many times this week about this Montreal offense. I just want to see some fundamental football. I don't want to see any fancy tricks by Cody Fajardo. I want to see him connecting with his receivers. No nonsense. No nonsense. That's what I would like to see as a Montreal fan. And I think they can do that. If this defense plays as disciplined and as sharp as they have been all season, this is not going to be a problem. So great. Let's get that win in Montreal. Let's make the rest of the season tougher for the Red Blacks. Okay. All right, let's wrap it up there. Oh, we should also at this point, because I tend to always forget these kind of things, wish a happy Thanksgiving to any Canadian listeners out there. I must say, I really appreciate this Monday night game. This Ottawa-Montreal game will literally be a Monday night game for us here in Central Europe. This will literally go off at 7 o'clock. This is going to be the first time, I think, when I watch a game live this season. From start to finish. This will be great. I can't blame
you for being excited for that. That Thanksgiving Monday game is usually one based off my work schedule and the schedule of when I need to pick up my kids at school that I tend to just not be able to see. So I'm glad you're going to be able to enjoy it. I'm also glad it doesn't make a ton of, it usually hasn't meant a ton in the standings, but this year it means a little bit. So I might try to catch it on the replay possibly, but I'm not too sad about not being able to see that one live, but I'm happy you're going to be able to.
That's pretty wild. This is actually one of the few games where most Americans won't be able to watch it in real time, being at 1 o'clock Eastern on, Monday, and most Americans will be working. So, that's pretty wild.
When they've done double headers in the past, and before I had before Jeremiah was in my life. There was a year or two when they had a doubleheader, and I just said, you know what, that seems like a good day to take off and just watch football all day. That's
Yeah.
just not part of my life at this point. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually at a good place in my work schedule now where I'm managing to slowly clean Monday. So soon Monday will be a complete day off for me. And whereas in the past I've used that to, watch all the Sunday NFL games on Monday, now I'll be able to like bookend that with this nice CFL game here on Monday night. So thank you for that. Happy Canadian Thanksgiving to those celebrating that holiday. Have a good long weekend up there up north. And we can sign off the show for this week. Unless you have any last second thoughts, Joe. Good luck in our matchup, our fantasy matchup next week, I guess. I don't think you'll have much trouble with me.
well, I hope not. But if you win, go win the whole thing, will you?
Okay. Likewise, bro. Likewise. All right. Let's get out of here. This has been the Rouge, White, and Blue CFL podcast, a production of the Shotgun Sports Network, sponsored by RoyalRetros.com. My name is Oz Davis. I've been the co host. And for my co host, Joe Pritchard, I am saying happy Canadian Thanksgiving. Have a great week. Enjoy the games.